A group of friends went on a trip and never returned. What was found 5 years later will shock you. In the summer of 2013, 5 college friends drove into the forest and were never seen again. No bodies, no clues, not even a tire track. For 5 years, the case went cold. Until one day, their car was found. Old, abandoned, in a place that doesn't exist on any map. What happened to them? Why did only one come back? And what is he still too afraid to say? Some stories aren't meant to be told, but once you start this one, you won't be able to look away. It was the summer of 2013. Hot, wild, and full of promise. In a small town outside Asheville, North Carolina, 5 college friends were ready to escape the routine of exams and lectures. They had just wrapped up their junior year and wanted one final adventure before graduation pulled them in different directions. The group was tight-knit. They'd been friends since freshman year, bonded by late-night study sessions, camping trips, and an unshakable desire to experience life beyond textbooks. There was Omar, the calm and observant one, majoring in psychology. Sammy, the thrill-seeker, always looking for something new and a bit dangerous. Ziad, the quiet thinker who preferred nature over people. Tim, the funny one, always cracking jokes to keep spirits high. And finally, Waleed, the skeptic who didn't believe in anything paranormal but secretly watched horror movies alone at night. They packed light, stuffed their bags with snacks, flashlights, water bottles, a Bluetooth speaker, and an old Nikon camera that Ziad insisted on bringing. They rented a used Jeep Cherokee, loaded their gear, and hit the road just after sunrise. Their plan was simple: drive north toward the Appalachian Mountains, camp in the woods for 3 nights, disconnect from the world, and return home by the end of the weekend. No cell phones, no Wi-Fi, just nature, stars, and each other. Sammy drove. Tim DJ'd with a playlist of indie rock and retro hip-hop. The windows were down, the wind rolled through their hair, and the world felt wide open. Hours passed. They stopped for gas, took photos at scenic overlooks, and joked about setting up tents with no idea what they were doing. At a diner halfway there, an elderly waitress asked where they were headed. "North of Spruce Pine," Omar said. "Just some random woods we found on the map." She paused, frowned slightly. "Be careful up that way. Roads get twisted. And the woods, they don't forget," she said, before walking away. The friends exchanged confused looks, but brushed it off with laughter. "Classic horror movie warning," Tim joked. "Now all we need is a broken-down car and creepy whispers in the dark." They had no idea how close to the truth he was. As the sun dipped lower behind the mountains, painting the sky in orange and purple hues, the Jeep turned off the main road onto a gravel path that zigzagged into the woods. That was the last time any of them were seen or heard from again. The gravel road crackled beneath the Jeep's tires as they drove deeper into the woods. Trees thickened on both sides, their tall trunks casting long shadows across the path. The GPS had stopped updating miles ago. Cell signals were gone, but none of them seemed to mind. Not yet. "This place is perfect," Ziad said, his face pressed against the window, eyes wide with fascination. "Untouched. Pure. Creepy as hell, if you ask me," Waleed muttered, gripping the back of the passenger seat. "There's no trail markers, no signs, not even a map pin." "That's the whole point," Sammy replied. "Adventure, remember? We're not here to be safe. We're here to get lost. In a good way." The forest grew denser, vines wrapped around tree trunks. Strange bird calls echoed through the thick canopy, distant and unfamiliar. The sunlight barely reached the ground now. The air felt cooler, heavier. After another 20 minutes, the road came to a dead end. A small clearing surrounded by thick trees and silence. No campsites, no cabins, just untouched forest. They parked the jeep at the edge of the clearing. Omar checked his phone again. No bars. "Well," Tim said, stretching and hopping out of the car, "this is either the best decision we've ever made or the beginning of a Netflix documentary." They set up camp quickly. 2 tents, a campfire ring made of stones. Logs dragged around for makeshift seats. Ziad wandered off with his camera, snapping shots of mushrooms, moss, and strange claw marks on a tree trunk. He didn't mention the claw marks to the others. As darkness fell, the forest became unnervingly quiet. No crickets, no wind, just the occasional rustle, too heavy to be a squirrel. They sat around the fire, roasting marshmallows, sharing ghost stories, and laughing loud enough to keep fear at bay. But every now and then, their voices dropped, eyes darting toward the woods at the sound of a twig snapping, or maybe a whisper. "I swear I just saw something move over there," Walid said, pointing into the trees. "Probably a raccoon," Omar replied, though he didn't sound sure. They laughed it off again, louder this time, forcing the unease down with jokes and stories. By midnight, one by one, they retreated into their tents. The fire died down, casting flickering shadows across the clearing. The forest watched in silence, and somewhere deep within the darkness, something moved. Morning sunlight filtered through the tall pines, casting pale golden stripes across the tents. Birds had returned with soft, scattered chirps. The silence of the previous night was gone, but a lingering tension remained in the air. Sami was the first to wake. He unzipped his tent and stepped out barefoot onto the dewy ground. Something felt off. He couldn't place it. The others stirred gradually, rubbing their eyes, stretching, complaining about the cold and the hard ground. "I heard footsteps last night," Walid muttered as he stirred instant coffee over the fire. "They circled our tents. Twice." "Stop trying to scare yourself," Tim replied, already halfway through a granola bar. "I slept like a baby." Ziad didn't respond. He was staring into the trees, camera in hand, flipping through last night's photos. His face was pale. "Guys," he finally said, "look at this." They crowded around. On his camera screen, one of the last photos from the evening showed the fire, slightly blurred. But in the background, barely visible behind a tree, a tall figure, dark, slender, unmistakably human-shaped. "That wasn't there last night," Ziad whispered. "I swear, no one was standing there when I took this." Sami looked again, trying to find a logical explanation. It could be shadow distortion, or just bark. Trees can play tricks. Omar didn't speak. He stared at the image for a few seconds longer, then turned toward the forest, as if he expected to see someone, or something, watching them. They tried to shake off the unease, and decided to explore deeper into the woods. They left their campsite intact, taking only their backpacks, phones, and some trail snacks. But just 10 minutes into the hike, the atmosphere changed. The path became uneven. Roots clawed from the earth like twisted fingers. The birdsong vanished. The wind stilled. And then, the jeep's alarm echoed faintly behind them. "What the hell?" Sami said. "We locked it, right?" They rushed back toward the clearing, pushing through branches and tripping over rocks. When they arrived, the jeep was there, same spot. But the passenger door was wide open. No one had touched it. Ziad checked his camera. The battery, which had been full minutes ago, was now dead. Completely drained. Tim's phone, too, wouldn't turn on. Then the Jeep wouldn't start. Sammy tried everything. Ignition, battery, jump start from the backup charger. Nothing worked. The dashboard lights flickered once, then died completely. "Okay, that's not possible," he muttered. "We need to leave," Waleed said, pacing nervously. "I don't care if we have to walk to the nearest highway." But Omar was staring at the edge of the forest. His voice was low and careful. "Guys, do you hear that?" From deep within the trees, a distant, low humming sound. Not mechanical, not animal. A vibration, like chanting, carried by no wind. They froze. For the first time, none of them had a joke. No one laughed. No one moved. Because in that moment, they all realized the same thing. They weren't alone. Nightfall came faster than expected. The group had spent the afternoon trying everything they could to get the Jeep running, checking fuses, replacing cables, even removing the battery entirely and letting it rest, as Sammy suggested. Nothing worked. By 6 p.m., the sky was already turning orange behind the trees, and the forest seemed to grow darker than it should have. Heavier, like it was swallowing the light. "We'll try walking out in the morning," Omar said, poking at the fire. "It's too dangerous now. We don't know which direction leads to the main road. Or if it's even still out there," Waleed muttered under his breath. They ate in silence. Protein bars, trail mix, and the last of the instant noodles. No one had much of an appetite. The unease from earlier still lingered. Ziad hadn't spoken much all day. He kept glancing at the trees, his camera useless in his lap, the battery still dead. As the fire crackled, the group sat in a loose circle, the shadows from the flames dancing across their tired faces. "I don't care what you say," Tim finally broke the silence. "That door didn't open by itself. Something, or someone, is out there." Sammy sighed. "Look, I'm not saying this isn't weird. It is, but let's not let our minds spiral. We're tired, we're hungry, and we're stuck. That's a recipe for overthinking." Just then, snap. A sharp crack echoed from the forest behind them. Not a twig, not something small, a branch, heavy, snapped in half. Everyone froze. "Tell me you heard that too," Waleed whispered. Ziad nodded slowly. It was close. They stood, eyes scanning the dark beyond the fire's reach. The sound didn't return, just silence. Tim grabbed a flashlight and shined it toward the trees, only to reveal nothing, just layers of shadow and shifting leaves. They tried to laugh it off again, but it didn't work this time. The laughter was too forced, the night too still. Reluctantly, they went back into their tents, 2 people in one, 3 in the other. They zipped themselves in and laid in silence, listening to every single rustle outside. The fire began to die out slowly. And then a scream, far off, echoing through the trees, high-pitched, not quite human, not quite animal. Ziad sat up instantly. "You heard that, right? You all heard that?" No one responded, but he knew they had. He could hear their heavy breaths. Their silence was the only confirmation he needed. For the next hour, they lay motionless, waiting for the scream to come again. It didn't. But something worse happened. From just outside their tents, footsteps, slow, deliberate, circling, leaves crunching, sticks breaking. Once, twice, then silence. Omar held his breath. He could feel the presence just beyond the thin tent fabric. Something waiting. But it never entered. It didn't even touch the tent. It just stood, watching. Eventually, the sounds faded. The forest returned to its awful, suffocating silence. Morning felt like it might never come, but when it did, one of them would be gone. The morning light did nothing to ease their fear. The forest was quiet, unnaturally so. Birds didn't sing. No wind stirred the trees. The fire had long since died, leaving behind cold ash and the faint smell of smoke. And Tim was gone. His sleeping bag was empty. His shoes were still inside the tent. No sign of a struggle, no blood, no broken zippers. He had simply vanished. "Tim," Omar called out, his voice trembling slightly. They searched the area, first the clearing, then the trees. Sammy shouted his name again and again. No answer. "He wouldn't just wander off," Waleed said. "He's not that stupid." "We all heard those footsteps last night," Ziad added, his voice low and dry. "He didn't walk away. Someone took him." Omar looked around. The ground was damp from morning dew, but there were no footprints. None. It was as if Tim had evaporated into the air. They sat in silence, stunned. Fear sat like a weight on their chests. Even Sammy, the fearless one, was shaken. "We can't stay here," he finally said. "Let's hike out now. No more waiting." They packed quickly, stuffing their gear back into bags. Ziad slipped the dead camera into his backpack, refusing to leave it behind. Just before they left, he noticed something odd. A faint line of disturbed leaves leading between two trees. A trail that hadn't been there the day before. "Guys," he called, "come look at this." The trail was narrow, winding deeper into the woods. The trees around it were strange, darker, older, covered in vines and lichen. At the base of one tree, a rock had strange marks carved into it, symbols that didn't resemble any language they knew. "This is a trap," Waleed whispered. "Or it's where they took him," Omar said. No one wanted to go, but the idea of staying was worse. With no car, no phone, and one of them already missing, they had no better plan. So they followed the trail. It wound downhill for over an hour, growing steeper and denser. The deeper they went, the darker it became, like the canopy above was thickening, blocking out the sun. Then they saw it, a cabin, tucked between ancient trees, hidden from the world. It looked like it hadn't been lived in for decades. Rotting wood, broken windows, moss crawling up the sides. But the door was slightly open. "No," Waleed said immediately. "Absolutely not. No way I'm going in there." "We can't turn back now," Omar replied. "If Tim is in there, we have to know." Sammy pushed the door open slowly. It creaked like something out of a horror movie. Inside, the air was damp and musty. Dust floated in beams of dull light. Cobwebs filled the corners. But that wasn't what made them all stop. On the far wall, drawn in red, like blood or paint, were 5 stick figures. Simple, crude, childlike. One of them had an X over it, and beneath them, scrawled in uneven letters, "One down." The silence in the cabin was suffocating. No one moved. The only sound was the wind outside. Or maybe it was just the sound of their breathing. 5 crude stick figures, one crossed out. Tim was gone, and now the cabin confirmed what they had feared but couldn't say aloud. Someone, or something, was keeping track. "We need to leave," Waleed said, his voice cracking. "We need to leave now." But as they turned to exit, the door slammed shut on its own. A gust of air blew out from nowhere, flipping pages of an old, moldy journal that lay on a broken table nearby. Ziad picked it up with shaking hands. The journal was handwritten, its ink smeared and faded. Page after page detailed strange occurrences. People getting lost in the woods, hearing voices, seeing shadows, forgetting who they were. The final entry read, "I am the last. I hear them at night. They live in the trees. I can't leave. I tried. The woods always bring me back." As he read those words aloud, the floor beneath them creaked sharply. Dust fell from the ceiling. Something was above them. Sammy and Omar immediately grabbed sticks from the fireplace, the only weapons they could find, and quietly climbed the stairs to the second floor. Every step groaned under their feet. The upper level was a single room, empty, except for a wooden chair placed in the middle. On the seat was an old Polaroid photo. Omar picked it up slowly. It was a blurry picture of the cabin from the outside, but standing at the door was Tim. His face was half in shadow. He was staring directly into the camera, but the photo was dated June 3rd, 1987. "This can't be real," Sammy muttered. "He was with us 2 days ago." They heard Waleed scream from downstairs. They ran down fast, too fast, nearly tripping over the last few steps. But Waleed wasn't there. Gone. Just like Tim. His bag still on the floor, shoes by the door, no signs of a struggle, no sounds, nothing. Sammy stood frozen, whispering, "No, no, no," over and over, as if saying it would undo what just happened. Ziad dropped the journal and backed away from the wall toward Omar. "We're being hunted," he said, "and we're next." Omar stared at the wall. The stick figures had changed. Now 2 were crossed out. They didn't wait. They ran out of the cabin. No direction, no path, just away. Branches tore at their arms. The woods felt endless, shifting. The trees looked the same. The forest had no map, no order, no mercy. Eventually, exhausted, they collapsed near a dried-up creek bed. There were only 3 of them left now, and the sun was already going down again. The sun dipped below the horizon fast, too fast. Shadows spread like spilled ink across the forest floor. The 3 remaining friends, Omar, Sammy, and Ziad, sat by the dry creek bed, barely speaking. The silence between them was no longer awkward. It was terrifying. Sammy broke it first. "We need to build a fire. Something. Anything to keep it away." "What is it?" Ziad whispered. "You keep saying it, but none of us have seen anything." Omar stared off into the darkening trees. "I think I have." Ziad and Sammy looked at him. "Last night," Omar said, "I didn't say anything because I wasn't sure. I thought it was a dream, but when those footsteps were outside the tents, I saw a shape." "What kind of shape?" Sammy asked. "Tall, thin, not human, or not anymore?" Sammy didn't want to believe it, but deep down, he did. They all did. As night fell, they built a fire using whatever dry wood they could find. Ziad tried to power his camera again, but the battery remained dead. Even the spare wouldn't turn on. All of their phones were the same. Black screens. No power. No explanation. Then, the noises began. Not footsteps this time. Breathing. Heavy, slow breathing. Not from any of them. It circled again. But this time, the sound didn't stay at the edges. It came closer and closer. Branches snapped behind them. Sammy spun around, holding a thick branch like a bat. And then they saw it. 2 eyes, glowing faintly orange in the darkness, watching, unblinking. The shape was massive, nearly 7 feet tall. Thin limbs, skin like stretched leather. It didn't move like a man. It moved like a shadow that had learned how to walk. None of them spoke. Ziad lifted a flashlight, hands shaking, and pointed it toward the creature. But the second the light hit it, it vanished. Not into the trees, not behind a rock. It just blinked out of existence. But something had changed. The fire began to dim. The flames hissed, struggling for air. "What the hell is happening?" Sammy shouted. Then came the whispers. Software incomprehensible, right behind them, then right beside them. Then for a moment, inside their heads. Omar dropped to his knees, holding his temples, eyes squeezed shut. "I hear it," he whispered. "It's talking, but not in words." What is it saying? Ziad asked. It knows our names. They didn't sleep that night. They huddled by the fire until morning, jumping at every sound, every shadow, every gust of wind. And when the sun rose, they checked their surroundings. Footprints, massive, elongated, circled their camp in perfect loops. But there was no sign of Ziad's flashlight or Omar's backpack. Gone, like pieces were being taken one by one. Sammy looked around and said, "We're not being hunted randomly." Ziad's voice was hollow. "It's a game." Omar said nothing, because he already knew the rules, and they were losing. Morning light didn't bring comfort this time. It only revealed what the darkness had left behind. Ziad stood frozen in front of the jeep. He had been the first to reach the clearing again. Somehow, without realizing it, they had walked in a wide circle through the forest. After running aimlessly the night before, they ended up right back at their original camp. But the jeep was different now. The windshield was cracked, as if something had struck it from the inside. Branches were tangled through the grille. Mud had crusted over the tires. But worst of all were the carvings on the back door. At first, they thought it was vandalism. Then, they looked closer, deeply scratched into the metal. "Turn back. You aren't meant to see this." One by one. And just below that, a perfectly carved eye, wide open, watching. Ziad backed away, breath shallow. Sammy ran his fingers over the carvings, his skin prickling. "No way this was here before," he said. "Someone did this. Last night." "Or something," Omar added. They opened the doors carefully. Inside, everything had been shifted. Clothes dumped, bags ripped open. The camera Ziad kept inside was shattered. His notebook, where he'd sketched the trail symbols, was gone. "We're being sent a message," Ziad said. Sammy turned sharply. "No, we're being toyed with." Omar walked around the jeep. On the hood, in the layer of dirt, was a handprint. But it was too long, too wide. The fingers weren't human, and there were 6 of them. They sat together, trying to plan. But every idea, retracing steps, building a signal fire, climbing trees for GPS, failed. There was no signal, no way to orient themselves. The forest warped around them like a maze. "Why us?" Ziad whispered. Omar didn't answer. He was staring at the tree line. A figure was standing there, not hiding, not approaching, just watching. It looked like a person, but wrong. Limbs too long, head tilted too far. It didn't move, not even when they pointed at it. Ziad raised the flashlight. Gone, as if it had never been there. Sammy finally lost it. He kicked the side of the jeep, punched the seat, cursed the forest. Then he stopped, because something was inside the glove box. He pulled it open and found a Polaroid, old, yellowed. It showed the 3 of them, Sammy, Ziad, Omar, standing in the woods, but none of them remembered this photo being taken. And in the background, standing behind them, was the same figure, the tall one, the watcher. Ziad turned the photo over, scrawled on the back, in red ink, 3 left. They didn't speak for several minutes. The Polaroid had shattered something in them. The fragile belief that maybe somehow this could still be explained. But now, even the illusion of logic was gone. Someone had taken their picture. Someone had been standing behind them, and none of them had noticed. Ziad dropped the photo. "We're not in a forest anymore," he said. "This place, it's something else." "Then we get out," Sammy said firmly. "No more exploring. No more waiting. We walk in one direction and don't stop." They chose east, the sun's rising direction, and began to move. Fast, focused. For hours, they trudged through brambles and uneven terrain. Thorns tore at their arms. Shoes sank into mud. Their legs ached. Their water ran low. Still, they pushed forward, determined not to stop. By early afternoon, the trees began to thin. They saw the edge of a clearing. Open sky. A flicker of hope. Ziad smiled weakly. Finally, they stepped out and froze. Before them was the jeep. The same clearing. Same crushed fire pit. Same fallen log. They had returned to the exact spot they'd left that morning. Sammy dropped to his knees. No. Omar staggered back. We didn't turn. We never turned. We went straight for 6 hours, Ziad shouted. That's impossible. But it wasn't, because they were stuck in a loop. The realization sank in like ice water. The forest wasn't just confusing. It was alive, changing around them, keeping them trapped, watching them panic, just like it wanted. They were being hunted, yes, but they were also being studied. Ziad opened his backpack and found something that made his heart drop. The photo. The same Polaroid they'd left behind in the dirt, now tucked neatly inside his journal. As if something had placed it there on purpose, and underneath it, a second one, new. This time, the picture showed only 2 of them, Sammy and Ziad. Omar was gone. Ziad looked up. Omar, he called. No response. Omar, Sammy spun in every direction, eyes wild. He was just here. He was right behind us. But there was no trace of him. Not a sound. Not a footprint. Not even a broken twig. Ziad clutched the photo. The back had another message, scribbled in uneven ink. 2 left. They stood in silence, side by side, the forest pressing in around them like a tightening noose. And the whispers started again. Sammy and Ziad didn't run this time. There was nowhere left to run. The forest had made its rules clear. It wasn't letting them go. Every path was a circle, every direction a trap. Time felt warped. Their bodies were exhausted, but it could have been hours or days. They no longer knew. They sat by the dead fire pit, the same one they had built what felt like a lifetime ago. The air was colder now, still. Even the insects had gone quiet, as if nature itself was holding its breath. I don't think we're going to make it, Ziad whispered. Sammy didn't answer. He was staring into the woods, his eyes glazed, fists clenched. His knuckles were pale. His jaw was tight. He had reached the edge, not of the forest, but of his own mind. You said this was an adventure, Ziad added softly. Sammy's voice came out low and hollow. I thought I could handle anything. Ghost stories, isolation, even getting lost. But this, he paused. This is something else. This is something we were never meant to find. They sat in silence for a while. Then Ziad stood. I'm going in. Sammy looked up. Into the woods? To where it wants me to go. Sammy jumped up. What are you talking about? It's been leading us, testing us, and I think it's waiting for someone to give in, to walk into its heart. That's insane, Sammy said. You go in there alone, you won't come out. Ziad looked over his shoulder. Neither will we. Before Sammy could stop him, Ziad turned and began walking towards the thickest part of the forest. No trail, no map, just forward. Sammy shouted after him, Ziad, don't! But Ziad never turned around, and within seconds, the trees swallowed him. Sammy stood frozen, heart racing, waiting for a sound, a scream, a crack, anything. Nothing. He waited until nightfall. Then came the final whisper, not in the air, but inside his mind. One remains. Sammy collapsed beside the jeep, trembling, alone. He didn't sleep, he didn't eat, he didn't cry. He just sat. Hours passed, or maybe days, and then someone found him. A park ranger doing a routine survey of the area. He spotted the jeep from a distant ridge and hiked down to investigate. Sammy was sitting against the tire, motionless, eyes blank. He didn't speak. Not at first. Not even when they asked his name. Only days later, in a hospital room with lights that didn't flicker and walls that didn't whisper, did he say his first words. "We were never supposed to find that place." Then he whispered something else. The ranger leaned in closer. Sammy's voice was a breath. "It's still watching." 5 years later. It was the summer of 2018. The mystery of the missing students had faded from public memory. The search had ended long ago. Headlines moved on. Families grieved. The forest remained untouched. Until a drone, flown by accident over a restricted zone near the Appalachian Reserve, picked up something strange. A vehicle, covered in vines, partially buried in moss and leaves, an old Jeep Cherokee. Investigators dispatched a small team to the coordinates. It took them nearly a full day to reach the site through overgrown brush and dead paths that weren't on any map. When they arrived, they found the Jeep exactly as it appeared in the drone footage, weathered, silent, untouched by time. Inside were 5 backpacks, 5 wallets, 5 phones, all dead, and a broken camera, its lens cracked but intact. In the back seat lay an old sleeping bag, a pair of shoes, a notebook with torn pages, and a photo. It showed 4 young men, smiling, standing by the Jeep. But there was a shadow behind them, vague, tall, watching from the trees, and none of the search team could explain how it got there or who took the photo. When they checked the Jeep's registration, the name matched one of the boys who had gone missing in 2013. But here's what truly unsettled the team. The grass beneath the tires was fresh, not dead, not crushed, as if the Jeep had just arrived, as if it hadn't sat there for 5 years at all. One of the investigators, a young officer named Rebecca Lane, felt a strange pressure in her chest, an unease she couldn't explain. Before leaving, she took a final glance back at the Jeep. For a split second, just one, she swore she saw a boy standing at the edge of the trees, pale, still, watching. But when she blinked, he was gone. She didn't report it. Back at the station, she reviewed one of the recovered phones. The screen wouldn't light up, but when connected to a forensic power source, the device came to life for just a few moments. There was one voice memo, never played, 45 seconds long. The recording began with silence, then static, then footsteps, running, breathing, a low growl, distant whispering in an unknown tongue, and at the very end, a calm, broken voice. Male, familiar. We weren't alone, and we weren't entirely alive. Then the audio cut off. The phone shut down permanently, and that was all that remained. Of them. The recording became evidence file number 1134A, stored in a restricted section of the State Police Archives. Few ever heard it. Even fewer understood it. But those who did never forgot it. It was labeled Recovered from Missing Persons Case, Appalachian Forest, June 2018. The voice had been identified as Omar West, one of the 5 students who vanished in 2013. Analysts enhanced the audio, trying to isolate the background noises. They found strange things. In the background, a rhythmic chant in an untraceable language. What sounded like hundreds of footsteps circling a second voice layered beneath Omar's, whispering the same words seconds after he spoke, but in reverse and faintly at the very end. Laughter. Nervous laughter. Childlike, but not human. When the tech team tried to replay the file a third time, the drive fried. Not corrupted, not erased, destroyed. Sparks shot from the terminal. They had to shut it down. After that, the department issued an internal freeze on the case. The file was marked Unsolved hazardous content, and buried. But stories began to circulate about hikers who went too far off trail, about rescue teams who never returned, about a place locals now referred to as the Loop, where time bends and people disappear without a trace. Some said the forest chose people, others said it punished them. But one thing was certain: Sammy Reyes was the only one who ever came back, and he never truly did. Now, in a psychiatric facility, under a false name, he sits alone each day, drawing the same image over and over: a tall, faceless figure standing behind 5 boys. One by one, the boys disappear, until only one remains. Then, in the last image, he's gone too, and in the corner of the page, a single word, written in trembling black ink: again.